Angie.
Hi, everybody. My name is Angie, and I'm an alcoholic. And I am glad to be here to speak on step 11. Thank you, Alice, for asking me. Well, I need to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm from Greenville, South Carolina. And back home, we lived in a little white house on a red dirt road. We got our water out of wells. We took baths in big steel tubs. We were just really, really country. And I'm from a family of Baptist ministers. So I went to church Monday through Sunday and then bring a lunch on Sunday. And my dad was a minister, my grandfather was a minister, and my great grandfather was a minister. And by the time I came to you, I was so confused. I didn't know what to do, really. I just was lost. I mean, absolutely lost when I came to you. And I remember being somewhere and hearing people talk about God and getting really, really angry. And, he didn't, because I didn't follow the way that my parents wanted me to go, that, there was something clearly wrong with me. And from my father's standpoint, if I had done A, B, C, or D, I was going to hell anyway. So I had already did A, B, C, oh yeah, and D. So I knew that, there was going to be a problem. And so it was so beat down into me that I just had so much anger towards the whole thing, because here my dad was this minister and he's, big and he's up there and he's talking about all this stuff. And I'm cringing every time he preaches, and especially on the days when, I don't know if you've ever been to a church where they, singled you out, but my dad did that a lot, by saying things like, somebody in here is drunk tonight. You know what I mean? And usually it was me. So yeah, so I went to a lot of church. I mean, I just was clueless when I got here. I didn't know what to believe and who to believe, or I didn't believe anything anybody had to say. Except for when I came in, I guess it was maybe a couple weeks after I came in, after I had decided that the only steps, I'd looked at the steps on the board and I decided that there was only a couple of them I was going to work. But this lady wanted to sponsor me just, out of the blue. And I said, I played softball growing up, so I knew sponsors bought people T-shirts and stuff like that. So about a month into, the sponsorship thing, I asked her, when am I going to get my T-shirt? And she was from England, and she would be like, your T-shirt, honey, we don't give out T-shirts here. And I was like, well, that sucks. So I went with her and I followed her. And I stayed around AA for, quite a while, never really believing that I was alcoholic or that God could do anything for me in my life. I had done too much, and I knew that he would never, ever forgive me for the things that I had done. And the two biggest things was my children. And I knew that something had to happen as far as me and my children were concerned, because they were not in my care. And I thought about them all the time, and it just brought so much heartbreak to even think about them. But I went ahead I got a sponsor. I did everything that she told me to do, but never really believing that it would work out for me. It was so weird. Like, I remember I heard somebody say, or somebody wrote it somewhere, be still and know that I am God. And that confused me, because in my dad's church, when you said be still, everybody jumped up, you know what I mean, and started dancing and stuff. So that was very confusing. Do I sit, do I stand, do I dance? I don't know what I do, but I wouldn't drink, that's for sure. And so my parents put me in Catholic school because, listen, we couldn't use any slang at home. We had to use all proper English. And if we didn't use proper English, we got in trouble. And little did I know that proper English that I would be talking would be very, very helpful in my career and in my recovery, because I did start speaking. And Teresa, you're just a gem. I love you to death. I just, I can't even tell you. But so when I got sober, and people would talk about this God thing, and yeah, I had to some extent, I did, know that God existed. I didn't know in what capacity, but he always seemed to work miracles in my parents and never in me. So I just thought that it was maybe a different God, like a teenage God or, whatever. But this entity, this whoever, always seemed to work for everybody else but me. And it wasn't until I was about 6 months sober, maybe 8 or 9 months sober, I don't know, that it dawned on me that I hadn't drank. I hadn't done anything. I had not drank. And who is doing that, Angie? At first I thought it was my sponsor, with all of her knowledge of the book and all this other stuff. And really the first time that I ever even got on my knees to pray was when I did the third step with my sponsor. And she didn't have me talk. She just held my hands and told me to close my eyes. And she said the third step prayer. And thank God, because I just could not get with this whole spirituality piece. And so I started, going to meetings, working the steps, working with my sponsor. I got an institution meeting, I'm doing all of this stuff and I'm not getting happy, but I am learning a lot. And one of the things that I learned looking back is that when I sat down and I did my fourth and my fifth step, I really thought that there would be some like light come out of the sky or whatever. But the truth of the matter is that I did digest some chunks of truth about myself. And, one of them being that, the way that I was treated in my life was the way that I demanded to be treated as a result of my actions. And, I came in, I was mad at everybody. I just didn't believe in anything. And I just kept going to meetings and I kept doing what my sponsor said. And I would get on my knees at night and I would thank God for my sobriety. And when I got up in the morning, I would thank God for waking me up, never really feeling anything. And in the midst of me going to meetings, I got introduced to a place where they meditated. And I had never meditated a day in my life. I didn't know anything about what it was about. And they had this play at this church, and I went there, and it was about meditation and some girl who struggled with it, and I couldn't believe it. So I just knew that would be my church. And so I started working with my sponsor, doing all this. I just did everything she asked me to do, and I can't tell you when it was, but I remember at about 2 years sober, I was sitting in my living room at the first apartment I ever had in my life. The first time anything was, in my name. I didn't know how to do anything when I got here. I clearly drank my mind away. But I was about 2 years sober, and I was sitting in my living room, and I was looking outside, and I saw these birds land, and it was so weird how it came like right into my spirit, like, you have this, Angie. You have this thing called alcoholism. And I was so excited because I had admitted it before, but I didn't really kind of like, I might have some of it, but not like you guys. And it came into my spirit, like, you're alcoholic, Angie. And I remember I ran across the hallway to my neighbor and I banged on the door. And I was like, when she answered, I was like, I'm an alcoholic. And she was like, oh my God, don't come to my door anymore. I know. It's like, thanks. And but I most certainly started to feel things happening. Like, I was very angry. I didn't like to talk to people. I yelled at people when I first got sober. And I remember that I started to calm down. And I knew it was the steps. I knew there was nothing that I was doing. It was the steps. And I didn't even believe in a power greater than, but I like that the steps said we came to, because that's what happened for me. I began to believe the stuff that was happening in my life. I had lived my life on the streets as a homeless woman the last 2 years of my drinking, pushing a cart, living building to building. And here I'm calming down. My head ran, you guys. I kid you not, it ran 24 hours a day. I was always thinking, oh, it couldn't even turn it off, couldn't do any of that. But all I did was what my sponsor told me to do. And she said, I want you to pray in the evening and pray when you get up in the morning. And I did the cheesy little thing with my shoes. I put them under my bed. Um, and that's how I would go, I would get on my knees and I would pray and I would thank God. And, one day it just seemed like things just started happening in my life. Like I wasn't hating everybody, and I was glad to see people. And when I came into AA, there weren't a lot of Black people in AA. So, I mean, there was this one Black lady, she was at the coffee bar, and her name was Alma Jean. She's gone to the meeting in the sky now, but her name was Alma Jean. And I ran into the first Black woman I seen. I ran into, and I was like, oh my God, what are we doing? This place is crazy. Come with me. And she said, oh, baby, just keep coming back. And I was like, oh my God, they got you. Run with me. And but yeah, and so things just started happening. And I began to do things like on YouTube, they have these guided meditations, and I started doing those, and started doing them on a regular basis. And then after doing it, meditating for probably a good year, I went to Gethsemane and participated in a silent retreat. And things just started happening. I mean, things that I could not deny, that was not a power greater than myself. And so I started doing this meditation stuff for a couple of years. And then one day I was at a meeting, and I read on the billboard that they needed somebody to do meditation. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I did it. And thank God, because it changed my whole outlook on everything. I mean, now I meditate an hour in the morning, and I meditate an hour in the afternoon, and an hour in the evening. And what it's done for me personally, my personal relationship with a power greater than, what it's done for me is strengthened me in a way and gave me enough courage to believe that I am somebody, I am an alcoholic, and I deserve to be sober just like anybody else did. I had hurt so many people in my family, and I had done so many things. And, I was just blacklisted from my family. And I grew up, in the streets. And this God was working in my life, even when things were bad, even when I didn't even acknowledge him, he was still doing work in my life. And the day came when I was in meditation, and I had my eyes closed, and I felt like this feeling in the pit of my stomach, which today I call my direction. And I felt this weird feeling in my stomach, and I just started to cry. And there was nothing wrong with me. I wasn't sad, any of that. And I just started to cry. And the first thing out of my mouth as I cried was, thank you, God. So those tears that came was a thankfulness that no person could have gave me. And in my sobriety, I ended up losing both of my parents. And I knew then that something had happened in my life, that, my mom, she had Alzheimer's. Well, she had dementia first, and she had Alzheimer's, and she didn't remember anybody. But on her bed by her nightstand, she had a picture of me. And when the nurses would come in to, do what they did for her, she would say, look at her, that's my baby. Out of all of us, that's my baby. And my mom and I had a very weird relationship, but she believed in God more than anybody that I mean, she believed in God. Like when she died, right before she died, she was very, very happy that she was going to heaven, and she was ready to go. And so things started happening. I started, singing at my church, and there were so many things in life that like was happening to me. I mean, I was traveling, I was speaking, I was doing, all this stuff. I mean, I was working 40 hours a week, and then Friday headed to the airport, and then, Sunday or Monday getting home. And I went. And so the same God that had blessed me with all of these things, once I started speaking, my head got big. It really got big. And not to the point where I thought I was better than anybody, but then my self-identification began to come from people. And the more you liked me, the better off I was. And I did that for probably 10, maybe 12 years until um, one day I was having some really bad headaches, and I went to the doctor, and he was telling me that if we were meant to fly, we would be birds, and that every time they pressurize the plane, it's locking the water in your body, um, you know, in your body, and it's not moving. And the water that was coming from my body, but it wasn't coming from my head. And I kid you not, you guys, my head was so big, and nobody ever told me. That's what I love about AA. I mean, it's like you could not see me for 6 months, and then you see me, you'd be like, "Hey, how you doing? Looking good." But my head was huge, and nobody told me, but nobody noticed, and that was good too. But I ended up having to get a water removed from my body, replaced. I had to get IVs, all this stuff. It was crazy. But the one thing that he said, my doctor, is that I'm going to sit you down, and he blocked me from flying. And so I had an opportunity to get with myself, and I did. I've been singing since, like I said, since I was a young girl, and I've written a lot of music and done a lot of things. And uh, when I started speaking, I just pushed God aside. I really, truly did. I became what you wanted me to be, and that's what I did all my life, and I did it even in my sobriety. Because see. When I was out in the streets, when I was drinking and stuff, nobody really too much cared about what I did or my singing or anything like that. And when I got to you guys, there was such a sense of love and security I saw in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous that I was just really, really happy about. And so anyway, when my mother passed, I knew that something had happened in my life, because I had got a phone call at work, and was told that she wasn't really breathing. And so I left work, and the ambulance took her on to the hospital. And when I got to the hospital, I went in, and she was almost gone. And I was talking to her and stuff, and I was just like, "Ma, I'm gonna be okay. I'm gonna be good." And my dad would say, "Please don't leave those people," talking about Alcoholics Anonymous. Stay close to them. And that's what I did. So I started having these feelings about stuff that was happening in my life. Like I didn't see, like I used to hate when the morning came and the birds would sing. You know what I mean? I used to hate that. And really got to the point where I just couldn't stand the silence. And what Alcoholics Anonymous has done, and God has done for me, it was taught me how to be still, and to know that He is God. And I started, doing all the stuff that I've been doing. And I got to, by the time I actually got to step 11, I already had an idea of what God was in me, not in anybody else, but in me. And I began to just do, I didn't know that it was necessary for me to have a personal relationship with a power greater than, in this process. And I didn't really move towards it, but it happened anyway, because I showed up and did the things that I saw other people doing. My dad passed, just a couple years ago, just a year ago, actually. And, all my life, I've been very distant, from my parents. I lived at home, but I didn't really have like a good relationship with them until I was the one that had to take care of the both of them, um, uh, when they died. And I was there when both of my parents passed. And I'll tell you what, I knew that there was a God personal to me when they told me that my mother was gone. And I closed her eyes, and I kissed her on her forehead, and I asked her to fly high. You know what I mean? It wasn't about me. It was about my mother. And, it was fly high, mother. And that's what, that's what it was. I had my dad another year, or so after my mom died. And our relationship was just it was not good at all. I don't care what I did. My dad always saw me as the person I was before I came to you. But the same with my dad as it was with my mother. that in the end, they were so appreciative of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and what you guys had done. In the very beginning, they were very resentful for what you guys had done. I mean, my mom used to drop me off like a mile away from the clubhouse because she was afraid somebody would see her car there. So I just, yeah. So anyway, by the time I got to step 11, I did have a relationship with a power greater than, which moved even more deeper. The more that you guys taught me, the more that, I meditated, the more that I was of service, the more that I, worked with new girls, it just kept coming to me. And like I said, when I started speaking, it left and I showed up, and it almost killed me. And I didn't know that I was running. You really don't ever know you're running until you stop. And I stopped. And I had been running even in my sobriety, you guys. I had been running even in my sobriety, not even knowing that all of the appointments that I was taking, all of the speaking that I was doing, all of this stuff that I was doing was not of God to me. It may be a service of what I was doing, but I didn't really, believe the whole God thing. And I lost it when I started speaking. I just, became so involved and so wrapped up in that. And it almost killed me. And, I got sick and I got slowed down. And I've been slowed down now for about 3 months because I take medicine I have to complete, and I can't, really be outside. So, so for the past month or so, I've been working closer with God than I ever have. And it's because God has isolated me so that I can hear him. I had no idea, you guys, that when I was traveling and speaking, that I was not hearing what God was saying to me. You know what I mean? One was slow down, and that was a negative. I loved speaking. I loved like going to different places. Slow down. You know what I mean? That wasn't me. So from 2005 until about a couple of months ago, I was all over the place and I got isolated. And I spend a lot of time with myself, but I spend a lot of time in the word, and I spend a lot of time in the book. And I know that I'm being isolated for a reason. And I know that something is coming and that I have to be still long enough to know what that is and to be prepared. You know what I mean? I wasn't prepared when I started speaking. I spoke for the first time I spoke was 50 people. The second time I spoke was at the International. You know what I mean? So there was not really no in between. So I wasn't prepared for what that takes. And it takes a lot to travel, to leave your family and to go do all this stuff. But when I finally got isolated here lately, I've been spending a lot of time with God. And for the first time in my life, I just want to do what he wants me to do. And I ask that every day. I have relationships with people, but there's absolutely nothing like the relationship that I have with God. And I thank him so much, you guys, because of the fact that left to my own devices, I'd travel until I drop dead, left to my own devices. But thankfully, I was snatched out of it so that I could see what I was doing. I have children, I have, grandchildren, and I was running from me. I had no idea that I was running from me. And when I finally stopped, there's this thing I read that said, we're all snow globes, and we run and rerun just to keep those things going in the snow globe, because if it stops, there could be a fiery dragon right there that we don't want to see. And that's exactly what it was for me. I had had so much stuff going on in my life that when I got sober, I was happy to be sober, happy to be speaking, but still not dealing with my stuff. And I became extremely bitter and didn't really want to hear too much of what anybody had to say. But I knew if I didn't know anything else, it's time for me to sit down. I need to sit. My sponsor says, sit your butt down. And that's what I did. And when I sat down, remarkable things started happening. because I can't go outside, I've been doing, a lot of Zoom lately, and, just meeting people, that I had closed myself off to by thinking that I was somebody, that I was famous in an anonymous program, which, you know what I mean? What? So yeah. It was really, really a rough time for me. Like, my ego was so huge, you guys. I didn't even know it, but it was huge. And, I stopped listening. I thought I knew everything. I isolated myself from people, you know what I mean? Except for the ones that I was speaking in front of. I really didn't have anything else to do with anybody after that. But the day came when I had to face those demons that I had, you know what I mean? And you can't run away from them. And so what I did was I just started going into the silence and asking God on the inside to just take my heart and change me. I really, really, really want to do your will. I've done my will when I was out of the rooms, and I've done my will in the rooms. And right now, all I want is just to do your will. And when I started asking for those things on a personal level, I began to feel people started to come into my life. Just in the last few months, so many people have been calling me and texting me and saying all this stuff. Now I have time. You know what I mean? I can talk to you now. Now I have time. I have nothing but time. You know what I mean? And so I can talk to people. I enjoy talking to new girls. I have women come over to my house every Wednesday for a big book meeting. You know what I mean? And it's like, I feel better today than I have in a very, very long time, you guys. And it's because I had to get back to basics. I had to get back to basics. I had to start doing the things that kept me sober in the beginning. You know what I mean? My ego had got so big that, my sponsor told me, she goes, Ange, I don't know this Angie, the one that's traveling and speaking. I don't know her. And nobody did. Nobody did. You heard my story, but you really didn't know me. And so I've kept up that work. For the past probably 10 years, I've been meditating. Now I meditate by myself. I don't have anybody there. I meditate by myself, and that time is precious. And I have to, ask God for the things that I didn't know that I could ask God for anything, because I'd always been told to pray for other people, to serve other people, to always serve, always do. You know what I mean? Your good will come from what you do of service. And that's true. However, it just wasn't happening, that way for me. And it wasn't until I got isolated that I realized God's been there. Thank God. Thank God that through all of the trials and tribulations I've been through in my life, that I've gotten the opportunity to look back and see where God has always been present, but I didn't acknowledge him. And here I am, sorry to cry, but I feel very deeply about my relationship with God and my relationship with people. You know what I mean? Like, I want you to get to know me. I want you to know who I am. You know what I mean? Through and through, because you guys are all I have. I don't have anybody else. Both of my parents are gone. Everybody's gone, and it's just me. And I feel like an orphan at 62 years old. You know what I mean? But then I have those men in my life and those women in my life who hold that figure for me. And I have sisters who help me daily. One of the things that I love about the 11th step is the prayer of Saint Assisi. Just make me a channel of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Oh my God. That within itself is deep. So now I'm meditating more, and I'm doing more of the 11th step. And I'll tell you what, you guys, it's so good that God allowed me to experience this stuff, because what is happening now is I'm working on my ministry, and finally feel like I'm doing what I'm called to do. And I've run from it all my life. I've run from it all my life. And it's time for me to get back to singing and doing all those things that I did for such a very long time. How much time do I have? I don't have a watch. Am I good? 10 minutes? 10? Thank you. So yeah, so I have two kids. I have a daughter that's 34, and I have a son that's 39. And I just have to tell you about them because this is definitely a gift. My son, I had him in prison. And my parents had to come and get him from prison. And my daughter, I had her in Bloomington, Indiana, after drinking with her and not having any prenatal care at all. And when I got to the hospital, I was getting ready to give birth to my daughter, and I was giving her up for adoption. And so when she came out, back in the day, they used to throw this black tarp over you so you wouldn't see the baby. And I saw her hair. And I remember that being the first time me questioning, like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I take care of my children? You know what I mean? What? So I had been talking to my sister back and forth, and she informed my parents that I was in Bloomington, Indiana, and I had just given a child up for adoption. And my parents called and said, don't, just have her bring her home. Now, this was some time ago. But when they gave me my daughter and they gave me my bus ticket, and I went up to the bus station, suddenly the thought crossed my mind that a drink won't hurt me. I bought a fifth of Jack Black, and I got on that Greyhound bus with my baby, and I drank the whole time. And by the time I got to Cincinnati, I was so inebriated that the bus driver went inside to the terminal and said, whoever's here with this woman with this baby needs to come and get her before she kills the baby. And so I had, my baby in my arm, I had her diaper bag, and I had a fifth of Jack. And I was drunk, you guys. And I'm walking down, and I got my baby here, and I'm bumping her up against, you know what I mean, up against the seats. I'm staggering, all this. And I get to the top step, and I slipped. And I can tell you that had I have fallen, that I would have dropped my baby before I would have dropped that fifth of Jack. You see, I'm an alcoholic. And as much as I love my children, I got this thing called alcoholism that's much more powerful than the love that I feel for them. And luckily, I, didn't drop her. But when I took her into the terminal, my dad came and got her out of my arm and said, we'll take her from here. And I said, Daddy, what am I supposed to do? And he said, baby, I don't know what you're supposed to do, but she didn't ask for this. You know what I mean? And to watch him walk away with her, and to watch them, take my kids and raise them as their own, they had every right to, because, I hadn't gotten sober yet. And today they told me that my daughter would never, be able to function as a person. She would be handicapped because I drank all the way through my pregnancy without taking anything. And I just want to tell you that my daughter, just graduated with her master's, and you know what I mean? And a double master's at that. And she's okay. And my son was in the penitentiary for 14 years, and he got out. And I can tell you that I watch him on a daily basis struggle with being in the penitentiary that long and being on the streets, and how to navigate that. And I feel for him, because we don't have a lot of stuff out there for, men that come home from prison. And, the one good thing is that he attends AA. You know what I mean? And he doesn't attend it with me. He does his own thing. And I let him. So I don't know, you guys. It's just, I believe so much in prayer and meditation, and I didn't at one time, and I do these days. So I incorporate that in my everyday. You know what I mean? Still from the third step to the 11th step. I most certainly pray those prayers and do what I need to do. And I hope that I have the courage and the strength to continue moving forward with what I need to move forward with. But that's all I got, I think.